Good afternoon and welcome to our first bill hearings of the 2022 session of the House and Government Operations Committee. This is a virtual committee meeting, so I would ask your patience if we encounter any technological issues or streaming processes. This bill hearing is being streamed on the Maryland General Assembly YouTube channel. Even though we're meeting on Zoom, our committee will adhere to our usual committee rules of one question and one answer from the panel, not one question and one answer from each individual panelist. And we've asked members to please keep their questions shorter than the expected answer. This bill hearing will have a break at 3 p.m. today because 7 members of our committee are also members of the House Rules Committee, which will be meeting at 3 o'clock. We'll see how many bills we can finish before that time. But any bills that are on the agenda will need to proceed after the rules meeting. And there'll be a sign in the public streaming area that says, and which will remain open along with this Zoom link while we are in recess for the Zoom committee. Our goal is to avoid breaking in the middle of a bill hearing. So that may mean that I stop a little bit early so that we don't stop a hearing in process. And I'm going to make sure everyone is muted. We will resume bill hearing shortly after the completion of the Rules Committee. HGO members, just remember to pay attention to your email communications from Richard to make sure you'll know when we reconvene. With that, we are going to start our hearings today. And our first bill of the day is House Bill 126, sponsored by Delegate Crosby, General Provision Standard Time, Year-Round Daylight Savings Time. Delegate Crosby, are you with us?
I am. Good afternoon.
Welcome.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Members of the HGO Committee. For the record, Delegate Brian Crosby, House Bill 126, General Provisions, Standard Time, Year-Round Daylight Savings Time. This bill is in the exact same posture you all passed out of the House or out of committee last year, and it really would put Maryland on permanent daylight savings time once the clocks jump forward after each surrounding state as well as the District of Columbia also enacts the same piece of legislation. That way we're all on the same time zone, or at least the immediate surrounding states on the Eastern time zone are in the same exact posture. As many of you heard me say before, this is more than just an annoyance. There are significant health risks when we mess with our circadian rhythm twice a year. The week after the clocks adjust, both forward and backwards, there's an increase in heart attacks, strokes, workplace injuries. There's lower work output, test scores are lower, and first responders see a spike in both car accidents and suicides. So there is well-documented consequences in shifting our clock. The only thing I want to touch on is that there are more opponents this year. And then they argue that the school start times would be adversely affected by daylight savings time, and students would be traveling to school in the dark. I am actually in agreement that currently schools do start a little early, and I applaud their efforts, such as the Anne Arundel County Public Schools, to move start times back. But the school start times are only part of the issue and part of the data. And I think that can be addressed more at a local level. If you look at the totality of the data, it really favors daylight savings. And I'll just give one measure, is that crime is lower when there is more sunlight in the evening. And you can go through a whole host of metrics. Additionally, if you look at most polls, and I think that even the committee last year, when I brought the bill forward, I think you all were polled. I think most people prefer daylight savings time by an overwhelming majority. So that is why I kept it. To be completely frank, I'm more or less impartial to which way we go, just as long as we stop messing with the clock. I know some of you have kids, and I've talked to many members of the committee who say they struggle to get their kids out of bed for school or get them to sleep. the night before school after they adjust it. And I would just like this chaos to end. So with that, I think Scott Yates is also going to testify, and I will be around for questions, but I ask for a favorable report on House Bill 126.
Thank you, Delegate. And at this point, I would call Scott Yates. Scott with us? Richard, do we know?
Yes, he's here.
Okay. Mr. Yates.
Hi, sorry, I was just having
there we
trouble
go.
clicking the button. Hi, I'm Scott Yates. I was just actually trying to change my little thing because that's my work thing on the bottom of the Zoom and not my personal. I'm Scott Yates. I'm the leader of the international movement to #Lock the Clock, otherwise known as just me. And this is my hobby that I do nights and weekends. I've worked with Delegate Crosby in previous years on this bill. I think this bill is a terrific step forward. The polling data that's out there shows overwhelming support for the idea of not having to change the clocks anymore. I think most of you in this committee were involved in the hearing last year. I think one of the big issues that kept this bill from going forward last year was concern about school kids. And I just want to, we didn't really get to talk about that last year, and I wanted to just address that head on, which is that, you know, frankly, yes, it is a concern. We do want to make sure that kids are as safe as possible. Locking the clock in daylight saving time actually is the best way to have them be as safe as possible. All the data is that kids are much safer in the with more daylight in the afternoon. Kids coming home, if they stay at school even a little bit longer in the winter for sports or whatever, and they're going home in the dark, it's in a much more dangerous situation for them. And to be going home in the dark, you may hear anecdotal evidence that it's less safe for kids to be going to school in the dark. That has been studied over and over and over by the Department of Transportation, by the state of Washington, and there's never been any truth to it. The best thing you can do for pedestrian safety, for all pedestrians, but especially for kids, is to have permanent daylight saving time. The other issue is just start times for, especially in the high school. It is true that, you know, my high school kid just graduated and is now at college, and those later teen years, they definitely need their sleep. And I think passing a bill like this is a great call to all of the school boards to say, hey, it's time that we really take a science-based approach to when our bill start times are, and we should be pushing those much later. But I'm a big local control guy, so I think that the school board should be making that decision, but this will give them the impetus to be able to make that decision. I'm happy to answer any questions, and thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Yates. That is the sponsor panel in favor of House Bill 126. Are there any questions of this panel? Seeing no members of the committee, I do have a question, Delegate. Do you have any indication from DC, Virginia, if they're on track for this?
Not every surrounding state is on track for this, but there are a bulk of them with bills in their House legislature. So I'm praying.
Okay.
Honestly, Madam Chair, I think that it's really going to come down to if New York does it, I think the rest fall.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that. All right. Seeing no further questions, we do have a panel of unfavorables. I'd like to call to the screen Lisa Van Buskirk.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Pendergrass, Vice Chair Pena-Melnick, and members of the Health and Government Affairs Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify again in opposition to House Bill 126. I am Lisa Van Buskirk, the leader of Start School Leaders Maryland and Anne Arundel County chapters. My written testimony contains more detailed remarks. I'm heartened by the sponsors and his fellow supporter advocating for later start times, and I look forward to one of the delegates putting forth some legislation mandating this, because our school systems have been studying this off and on for 25 years. And this legislature passed legislation in 2014 and 2016, but that hasn't moved the needle. So I look forward to a further discussion about school start times. But we as a nation, and indeed the world, have put health and safety at the forefront of our lives for the past 2 years. And we would be remiss to ignore the recommendations of health experts that permanent daylight savings time is unhealthy and unsafe. A delayed sunrise would put more Marylanders of all ages commuting to work and school in morning darkness, an unnecessary, unsafe, and unhealthy condition. It would be even more egregious for the adolescent students. Maryland schools, so I encourage you to look at my testimony, which on the last page shows a chart of the more students from K through 12 that would be traveling to school before sunrise, let alone be picked up in school buses in the dark, with sunrise as late as 8:39. Which of your which of your district schools would now start before sunrise, with sunrise as late as 8:39 under permanent DST? Last year's permanent DST legislation was not on the radar of most schools, with exception of Anne Arundel County Public Schools. When HB 1013 crossed over to the Senate, the committee chair wanted to hear from more community members and school citizens about the impact of permanent DST. I hope that you will be seeking your own school system's input about their operations and the impact of student safety before your vote. I hope that the Maryland Free State Parent Teachers Association will submit testimony that supports the national PTA position quoted in the Washington Post in 2019, that the national PTA is opposed to daylight savings times during the winter months because of the safety factor. Similarly, the Baltimore Sun's editorial board opposed the legislation in 2020. Please vote for an unfavorable report on HB 126. I would support amending the bill to include a mandate for minimum safe, healthy, and age-appropriate start times for all schools, as recommended by the 2017 Massachusetts study on permanent DST referenced in my written testimony, or an amendment to permanent standard time. If your issue is with the switch back and forth, then permanent standard time would be the better solution. And to answer the question about surrounding states, Virginia has legislation that is proposing permanent standard time. Pennsylvania has legislation that proposes permanent standard time, as well as other legislation proposing permanent daylight savings time. And Delaware in 2019 passed legislation for permanent daylight savings time. So the agenda is certainly mixed across the state surrounding us.
Thank you. Thank you. We're going to need to wrap up. I'd like to call Melissa Ellis, please.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Excuse me. I'm Melissa Ellis, member of the Board of Education of Anne Arundel County and a parent of 2 public school students. I am here to express my opposition to House Bill 126, a position also taken by the Board of Education of Anne Arundel County. You should have received written testimony with the board's opposition. As someone who has been intricately involved in the difficult work to move our schools to healthy hours, I urge you not to move this legislation forward, as it will undo our efforts to finally implement healthy hours for the students of Anne Arundel County beginning this fall. And it will create an insurmountable obstacle for other school districts throughout the state working toward that same goal. In 2014, the Maryland Departments of Health and Mental Hygiene and Education released a report based on decades of research supporting the need to shift middle and high schools to later start times for the health and safety of our students. I will not take the time to detail that research here, but in 2016, Governor Hogan signed into law the Orange Ribbon for Healthy School Hours, a bipartisan bill to recognize school districts that do the work necessary to create healthy school hours for their students. This fall, Anne Arundel County will be the first school system to become eligible for the top tier of the Orange Ribbon, and other school districts are moving in that direction, finally. The recommendation by all major health and education organizations, including the American Academy of Pediatrics, the CDC, American Psychological Association, and the National Parent Teacher Association, that middle and high schools start no earlier than 8:30 is based on the time of the sunrise under our current schedule of alternating between standard time and daylight savings time. A permanent daylight savings time would shift the sunrise an hour later in the winter, meaning that in January of each year, the sun would not rise until around 8:30 a.m. This means that students throughout the state would be walking to schools and bus stops in the dark, and not just high school students. This experiment was tried in 1994 under President Nixon, and according to articles in the Baltimore Sun and Smithsonian Magazine, the law was repealed following the deaths of several children in accidents in the pre-dawn hours. It is true that House Bill 126 does not address school hours or prevent school systems from making further adjustments, but starting high school at 9:30 a.m. is not only impractical, it is not possible with athletics and after-school activities and jobs.
Ms. Ellis, I'm going to need
Recognize-
you to wrap up.
Okay, I recognize that the change is difficult and I take no position on a permanent standard time, but permanent daylight savings time has been tried. It's not good for our students. It's not good for our community. Please do not repeat that mistake. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to call JP.
Hello, thank you for having me here. My name is JP. I am a retired software engineer. I'm an amateur astronomer. I'm the president of the nonprofit Save Standard Time. We are 501c4 recognized. We have scientists and doctors on our board. We are asking that you oppose this bill. We support permanent standard time and we oppose permanent daylight saving time. This bill would end clock change in the wrong direction. Polling shows that more Americans prefer permanent standard time, not permanent daylight saving time. If you were to ask your constituents, would they willingly set their alarm clocks an hour early in the dark, cold winter, they would say no, but that's what this bill would force them to do. It would delay your sunrise to as late as 8:39 DST and past 8 a.m. DST up to 3.4 months. Most school and work begins around 8 in the morning. Some begins even at 7 in the morning. So for nearly a third of the year, November through February, you'd be forcing millions not just to wake in the dark, but to travel to and begin their school and work in the dark. That's depressing and it's dangerous. Biologists are asking that we not start school before 8:30 a.m. If you were to institute this bill, we'd need to push that to 9:30. It would just not work. There was a mention about heart attacks. Heart attacks actually decrease in the fallback. They increase in the spring forward. There was a mention about crime. Crime decreases briefly when the clocks change, but when you look at the long term, that just levels out. So this crime is not a way to defend this bill either. The Maryland Sleep Society opposes permanent daylight saving time. The Southern Sleep Society, the National PTA, the National Safety Council, dozens more across the US, Canada, and the world. And finally, this is just federally prohibited. If you want to meet your constituents' demand to end clock changes as quickly as possible, that would be federally pre-approved standard time. So I ask please that you oppose this bill, recommend its amendment to permanent standard time. I'm glad to answer any questions you might have, and thanks very much for having me here.
Thank you, Mr. P. And thank you, panel, for presenting here today. Are there any questions from the committee of this panel? Okay.
I seem to not be hearing Ms. Cullison, so I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you. I can hear you. So I'm not sure why you can't hear me. Seeing no questions from the committee, that concludes the bill hearing for House Bill 126. We do now need to take a break in order for our committee members to be able to go to the Rules Committee. I will remind those committee members and folks who are watching and future panelists, we're going to be a little more stricter about the 2-minute time limit. We didn't have the clock up for the first speaker, so I felt I needed to give a little latitude, but in order for us to move things along, we need to be as efficient as possible. So thank you very much for your indulgence. There will be, we are now taking a recess, and please, the Zoom will stay open and the YouTube will stay open to let you know when we will reconvene. Thank you all very much.
All right. Are we still on track to start at 4?
No, we're not starting until 4:30, Al. We just got an email from Richard saying 4:30 is the new estimated start time.
4:30. Okay, thank you for letting. Okay.
4:30 is
got
the
it.
new 4.
Yeah, that's what the
Okay.
email from Richard says, estimated.
Okay. All righty, thank you. I'll be back then.
right. Hey, are we on for 4:30?
Sorry, I was.
I don't think so. They're still meeting and they're asking questions now.
So they're going to wait till the very end of that hearing?
Well, we kind of have to because there's 7 of our members over there.
Oh, wow.
So it's a pretty big chunk of folks.
Well, aren't we fancy?
Yes, indeed. So.
Okay, Michelle, you would say the same. There was no consultant or outside person.
Yeah, so I can't give.
No, there's been no DLS staff that have been involved with an outside consultant. As far as we know, there have been no consultants.
And I believe they've only done one MEP.
Thank you so much.
Let's see here.
Dr. Lukey.
Ms. Collison, will 167 be taken up today?
Yes, we will reconvene when the hearing is over. We do like to make sure that we cover the bills that we put out on an agenda on that day, but we can't always guarantee what time it's going to be.
Yeah, I'm running up against a county council meeting at 7 o'clock.
Oh, well, I feel pretty certain. Which bill are you?
167.
167. Okay, let me take a look here where it is in the agenda. Okay, it's actually 4th. Let's see. Okay. I mean, if your hearing is virtual and you can, switch on the computer from one to the other, I think you'll be okay. But if you're going to be traveling somewhere, I can't guarantee what time it will be.
Yeah, my problem is I'm testifying both with you and with county council.
Oh, right. Because I think once we get started, I think, probably about an hour.
Okay.
Is what we're looking at the most.
Okay, standing by. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for standing by.
Positing a scenario where, if you have sort of 29, I think that was your number 7.
Are we a go for 4:30 or a no-go or?
Or a no-go for 4:30. Hold tight. They're still meeting. The Rules Committee still meeting. So, but stay tuned.
Okay.
Okay.
On the bill hearing still?
Yes, you're just in time. We got one more minute.
Okay.
Okay, and then we will begin.
All right. Do I know how many we have left or where we're at?
We have 4 bills, but you know, I think that they're pretty concise.
Okay, great.
So
Thank you.
well, thank you. Thanks for hanging in there.
Coming back.
Okay. Richard, do we have most of the committee back with us?
Yes, we actually do.
Okay, super. Then we will begin. Welcome back to the Health and Government Operations hearings for this afternoon. We will continue with the bills that we have on our agenda. I really appreciate your patience and indulgence. The work of the General Assembly sometimes overlaps, and this was one of those times. So we wanted to, make sure that we send our gratitude and appreciation for your patience, both to committee members and to panelists and to those who are watching. So thank you and welcome back. Our next bill is House Bill 13, which is sponsored by Delegate Carr, and it's procurement, discriminatory hiring practices, disbarment. Delegate Carr, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon to you and to my distinguished colleagues. For the record, I'm Delegate Al Carr, and I'm pleased to be here as the lead sponsor of House Bill 13. This bill would prevent a company found guilty of discriminating against its Maryland employees by the federal government from receiving state contracts for a period of 5 years. In my written testimony is an article from the Baltimore Sun from 2019, which is an example of such discrimination. Enterprise Rent-A-Car Company of Baltimore, LLC, was ordered by a federal judge in 2019. The case started in 2016, but they were found guilty. They were ordered to pay $6.6 million to Black job applicants who had been rejected in this hiring discrimination case. And so the punishment to Enterprise was that they were prohibited from participating in any current or future federal government contracts until they agreed to implement specific steps to address the effects of past discrimination and to prevent it from occurring in the future. But there was no such sanction at the state level, even though this occurred in Maryland. Passage of House Bill 13 will help prevent future discrimination by sending a strong message that the state of Maryland will not reward discrimination. I ask for your favorable report.
Thank you, Delegate. There are no other panelists for this bill. Are there questions of the sponsor? Delegate Kaiser.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Delegate Carr. You picked 5 years, and I was originally going to ask why, but then I also heard you say that the federal government in making these decisions doesn't necessarily wait a period of time, but waits for some sort of action that maybe fixes the problem or a plan to fix the problem. So why didn't you choose something similar here to, and not 5 years or fixing the problem? What was your consideration? Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Delegate, for that excellent question. Yeah, so I'm not wedded to the 5 years. That is just something that I came up with, which sounded like a reasonable punishment for a company that would have been found to have discriminated against its Maryland employees. That type of action calls for punishment, and the punishment is to be debarred, that you cannot get any state dollars, any state contracts for a certain period of time, not forever, but for a period of time where it serves as a punishment. I felt 5 years was reasonable for that. So I think for simplicity purposes, that's what I settled on, as opposed to what actions the federal government may or may not take. But of course, I'm not wedded to that. I'm open and flexible if there is something that the committee feels is more appropriate than a 5-year debarment.
Are there any other questions of the committee for the sponsor? Seeing none, that concludes the work on the hearing on Bill 13. We're moving, and Delegate Carr, you stay where you are. The next bill is House Bill 163, Public Information Act, Required Denials, Sociological Information and Distribution Lists. Delegate Carr.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon, distinguished colleagues. For the record, I'm Al Carr. I'm very pleased to present House Bill 163 as the lead sponsor. If this bill looks familiar, it's because it's in the same posture as House Bill 272 of 2021, a bill which passed this committee unanimously and the House of Delegates unanimously. It's intended to strengthen the Maryland Public Information Act by closing loopholes that the Maryland Department of Transportation has used to keep the public in the dark about their eminent domain plans. Bill has 3 parts. First, it prohibits a definition of sociological information from including notices that are sent to homeowners whose properties might be surveyed or taken by eminent domain from MDOT. Second, it clarifies that a distribution list does not include a list of eminent domain survey notice recipients. And it also provides for the redaction of distribution lists where appropriate instead of an outright denial. And third, it requires that a requestor sign an affidavit that such notices would not be used for commercial purposes. The distribution list aspect of it, that's from a 2018 law that we passed. It was a priority bill from MML that was intended to help local governments and their residents by protecting people who signed up for county and municipal newsletters from getting spammed. That law was not intended to hurt local governments or citizens by a large state agency shielding the footprint of their road widening project from the public. I ask for your favorable report.
Oh, thank you, Delegate. As a member of the delegates panel, I would like to call up Delegate, you're on here twice. Rebecca Schneider.
I know she was on here earlier, but she may not have been able to hang on until the hour that we're at.
Okay, is Rebecca here? Richard, do you see her?
No, I do not.
Okay, then I believe that she has provided us with written testimony, which we'll be able to take a look at. Are there questions for the sponsor? Okay, seeing no questions, that concludes the work on House Bill 163. And we will go to House Bill 167. Commission to establish a Maryland Women's Veterans Memorial, sponsored by Delegate Bagnall. Delegate Bagnall, floor is yours.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, and committee members. For the record, I'm Delegate Heather Bagnall, District 33 in Anne Arundel County, testifying on HB 167, a bill to establish a commission to create a Maryland Women Veterans Memorial. You have my written testimony, so I will try to summarize. Though there are over 400 monuments to veterans in Maryland, as of now, there is no memorial specifically honoring the Maryland women who have served and continue to serve in all branches of our military. Members of this body may recall that we established a task force and then subsequent committees to create a memorial in Cecil County at the Chesapeake House Travel Plaza, which is dedicated to women's roles in all facets of service, including civil service to the military, but is not specifically for women veterans. From inception to dedication, the Maryland Women in the Military Memorial took 9 years in a serendipitous partnership with the Transportation Authority with the refurbishment of the Travel Plaza, which resulted in a truly beautiful monument with 0 dedicated state dollars. The National Conference of State Legislatures reports that women represent approximately 20% of new recruits, 15% of active duty military members, and 18% of the Guard and Reserve forces. NCLS also reports that as of March 2019, at least 28 states, the District of Columbia, and Puerto Rico have enacted legislation to establish a female veteran program, designate a commemorative day or month, or provide for special license plates. According to the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, in 2016, women veterans represented approximately 9% of the U.S. veteran population and approximately 13% of Maryland's veteran population. This bill, as previously brought forth as a resolution, was supported by the Latino, Women's, and Veterans caucuses. It is past time that we honor the service, dedication, honor, and sacrifice of these valiant women who have served in our armed forces, which are represented across the entire state of Maryland. And I humbly ask for a favorable report on HB 176.
Thank you, Delegate. I'd like to call Dan Tootle to speak.
Thank you. Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to testify on behalf of approval of HB 167 to the committee. I'm Dan Tootle, resident of Severna Park, Maryland, and a retired 21-year veteran of U.S. Navy service. I want to thank Delegate Heather Bagnall of District 33 for introducing this bill and its accompanying financial provision bill on behalf of the women veterans of Maryland. You have my written testimony that provides the background on why HB 167 needs to be approved during this year's Maryland General Assembly. So I will not be repeating in my oral testimony what is contained in what I've already submitted for your review. Simply put, a proper memorial that honors the women of this state who have put on the uniform and have served as a member of this nation's and our state's armed forces. This is long overdue. It is time for a Women Veterans Memorial to be established and managed by the Maryland Department of Veterans as a measure of our recognition for their service. In asking that this memorial be established, I'm also speaking on behalf of two Maryland women veterans, Hospital Corpsman Second Class Sarah Burns, 31 years of age, of Severna Park, and Navy Chief Cryptologist Shannon Kent, 36, of Crownsville, both of whom died while on active military duty within the recent past. Clearly, Sarah and Shannon, along with their sisters, who have served and who are now serving, are worthy of a proper memorial within Maryland that honors the commitment and sacrifice they have made on our behalf. I'll be glad to answer any questions of you may have. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there questions for the sponsor or her panel? I have a question, Delegate. Am I correct that this is an emergency bill? Would you, did I have that wrong?
I did not put this in as an emergency bill.
Okay, just wanted to clarify that then. Okay, are there any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much for the bill, and that concludes the work on HB 167.
Excuse me, I'm signed up to testify.
Oh, I'm sorry. And your name?
Rosemary Mortimer.
Okay. Well, I don't have you here, Rosemary, but since you waited all this time, I am going to give you time to speak. So thank you very much for your patience.
Thank you. Good evening, and to the members of the House Health and Governmental Operations Committee. My name is Rosemary Mortimer, and I live in District 12B in Howard County. It is my honor and privilege to represent the Maryland Nurses Association in our unequivocal support of HB 167. As a Vietnam-era veteran, this commission is important to me as it shows awareness that women military vets are underrepresented in the memorials here in Maryland. Having a commission established to consider setting up a memorial would be a significant step in rectifying that oversight. I well remember, and I suspect some of you do also, the controversy when the Vietnam Women's Memorial was added to the site near the Vietnam Wall. Yet it has now become a popular part of the memorial. Military women, the majority of whom are nurses, finally had a place to grieve and talk about their work. It has been very therapeutic for them. When the statue was dedicated, there was a parade down Constitution Avenue. Numerous male veterans stepped from the sidewalks, approached the women, and thanked them for their service. For many of these women, it was the first time they had been acknowledged. The men said things like, "We couldn't have done it without your support. and you saved my life. There is a tradition of the Maryland Nurses Association that when a new president is inaugurated, they are given a bouquet of flowers. The day following my inauguration, I went down to DC and put half the flowers at the Women's Memorial and the other half at the grave of my second head nurse and friend who's buried in Arlington. To this day, I can't explain why I had to do it, except that it felt like the right thing to do. The military taught me to lead and encouraged me not to be a bystander and the importance of recognizing accomplishments. This commission is about well-deserved and long overdue recognition for the Maryland women veterans. As many of you probably can tell, I am not a native Marylander, but this has been our home for close to 40 years. I really have tried to give back to the state that nurtured our family. I certainly would prefer to put those flowers at the memorial here in Maryland and not out of state. The Maryland Nurses Association stands ready to assist this commission and urges you to give HB 167 a favorable review. Thank you to all who have helped in this.
Thank you, Rosemary, and I apologize. Your name is on that list, so.
Perfect, you're right.
It was just my eyes. My eyes. So thank you again. Thanks for staying. And are there questions? Delegate Hill.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Madam Chair, privilege. Rosemary, I would like to thank you as one of my constituents for being here, and I want to thank you for your service. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Say hello to your mom for me, please.
No other questions? Then that concludes the bill hearing for HB 167, and we will move to the last bill of the day, which is House Bill 43. House Bill 43 is jointly assigned with the House Appropriations Committee. So we have with us today delegates Corman, Krim, and Metzger from the Appropriations Committee. The bill is Department of General Services, Energy Conserving Standards, Maryland Sustainable Buildings Act of 2022. Delegate Hill is the sponsor. Delegate Hill, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, committee and the joint committee members. So I thought Delegate Saab would be presenting this bill this year, but here I am. House Bill 43, which this committee is more than familiar with. It is the Department of General Services, Energy and Conserving Standards, or the Maryland Sustainability Buildings Act of 2022. This committee and subcommittee have worked very hard on this bill to get it into a form that it was able to pass last year with bipartisan unanimous support from this committee. And as I've said before, as legislators, to have the opportunity to do the right thing, save money, and to make a difference in the economy and the ecology is rare, but this bill allows us to do that. So a couple of main points, and you can see my written testimony. This bill would require the Department of General Services to come up with standards that all state buildings being newly constructed or significantly renovated would be asked to follow within budgetary constraints that would allow them to comply with LED 55 energy conservation standards, which, as most members on this committee know, also makes them bird friendly to mitigate against the bird strikes that are killing over 1 million birds each year. That's the bill simply. It is a win-win. And I'm going to leave it at that because you've heard this so many times and be available for questions.
Thank you, Delegate. I'd like to ask Ryan Fredrickson. Is Ryan still with us?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. Thanks for your patience.
Of course, yeah. Thank you for having us. And good evening, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Ryan Fredrickson. I'm here on behalf of the National Aquarium. It's great to see you all, including our very own Delegate Robin Lewis. We are here in support of HB 43. Combating climate change and saving wildlife and habitats are two of the National Aquarium's 3 strategic conservation goals. This bill aligns with both goals by helping state buildings conserve energy and implement industry recognized standards for reducing fatal bird strikes. The state of Maryland lies within a major migratory pathway for birds, putting birds at risk of colliding with man-made surfaces, often resulting in their death. It is estimated that window strikes are a leading cause of bird population decline, second only to habitat loss. In recent years, the aquarium has covered over 3,000 square feet of existing glass surfaces with bird-safe dot patterns. These dot patterns make the glass visible to birds and reduce the likelihood of fatally crashing into the treated glass. And the good news is they work. Bird strikes at the aquarium are down 74% since we installed these patterns. Retrofitting existing surfaces with bird-safe patterns is not the only option, as this bill points out, to reduce bird strikes. Incorporating bird-safe practices into building design can be a cost-effective way to both reduce bird strikes and save energy. The National Aquarium is currently in the process of replacing our iconic glass pyramid above the rainforest exhibit, which some of you may be aware, and thanks to the state's support. And once complete, the 684 new panes of glass will be frosted, bird-safe glass, which will not only prevent bird strikes, but will also increase energy efficiency within the exhibit. So our experience clearly shows that the standards outlined in this bill are highly effective and have multiple benefits. So we respectfully urge the committee to issue a favorable report. Thank you.
I believe you're.
Sorry about that. Ann Lewis, is Ann still here? Okay. Richard, do you see Ann Lewis?
No, she is not here.
Okay, then we will go to Mark Sutherland.
Hey, thank you very much. This is really happy to be able to do this. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I'm Mark Sutherland. I represent Safe Skies, Maryland, which is a statewide group focused on the conservation of birds, wildlife, and the human community. And so I really urge that the committee pass or issue a favorable report this year, as they've done 3 years in the past, because this is really a common sense solution to the two biggest issues facing the planet, as the United Nations has told us: climate change and the loss of biodiversity. It addresses that by again, dealing with the growth of excessive glass buildings across the nation and across the world, which do two things. When you're more than 40% glass, you are an energy loser. So you're contributing to climate change and greenhouse gas emissions. And you kill up to 1 billion birds a year in the United States, which has resulted in 29% fewer birds than there were in 1970. We've lost that many birds in the United States. The good news is we have a solution. The scientists at American Bird Conservancy, the builders at the Green Building Council have worked together and have a way to fix this. It's LEED Pilot Credit 55, as Ryan has mentioned, which has the solutions that in the design phase are cost neutral and actually save money over time because of the energy savings. If you don't do that, then you'll have to do retrofits over time, which will cost you a lot more. And the last thing I just want to say is that this is beginning to grow throughout the country. Cities in the West and the Midwest and Canada have already passed this. It passed in Minnesota. It passed just this last year in Illinois. And it is now the standard for federal buildings under the Federal General Administration. And so I think it's time for Maryland to step forward and do this as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'd like to invite Chris Parts to speak.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee, or I guess it's evening now. Thank you for your patience. And I'm here with AIA Maryland, representing nearly 2,000 architects across the state of Maryland, and simply just trying to share what this bill means for us as we are designing such buildings. The bill essentially is really focused upon two aspects of building design, taking a look at each facade of the building, looking at the bottom 36 feet, above 36 feet, and glazed corners and fly-through areas that birds might perceive differently, using what's called the threat factor that has been identified through the scientists at American Bird Conservancy, and trying to create buildings that will reduce the impact. And also, I think as we're taking a look at the materials, it looks at what is glazed and what is not glazed, and focuses on trying to create more efficient buildings there. Additionally, we're looking at lighting design criteria, really following the dark skies type criteria, where the lighting is designed to minimize uplight, minimize reflections, and shut off basically from midnight to 6 a.m. We've had a number of our members, member firms that have studied and designed such buildings that comply with this criteria. It's not time consuming, it's not cumbersome, and essentially what we've found is that it doesn't diminish valuable daylight from spaces, and we didn't witness any significant impact in terms of pricing to projects. If there is any impact, it's probably been a fraction of a percent of cost assessment as we're looking at glazing modifications to structures. So we encourage a favorable vote on this bill. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. Are there any questions? Any questions from the committee? Okay, seeing none, that concludes the hearing on House Bill 43 and the work before the committee today. I want to thank you all for your time and your testimony. We do have, the HGO does have a briefing tomorrow at 1 o'clock, and bill hearings will be at 2:30. So we will